Hello, horror listeners. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button for the channel. Also, make sure to tell us in the comments how you like the story and from where you are watching or listening. If you want to hear any specific story, feel free to request it. Now let's begin the story. I never imagined that an ordinary weekend at my best friend's house would become the memory that still wakes me at night. Years later, drenched in sweat. If I had known what was waiting, I would have begged my mom to say no, faked the flu, or even lied about a school project. But I didn't. I said yes because when you're 16, you don't think about danger. You think about popcorn, movies, laughter, and secrets shared under blankets. My name is Emily Carter, and this happened when I was 16 in the fall of 2012 in a small town in Maple Hollow, Pennsylvania. Leah Madsen isn't in this story. My best friend's name was Hannah Whitmore. We'd been inseparable since 5th grade. Late-night FaceTimes, matching bracelets, even a ridiculous pact about marrying brothers so we could be sisters forever. She lived with her mom, Margaret, and her stepdad, Tom Whitmore, in a colonial-style house on Deerfield Lane. It wasn't fancy, but it had that lived-in comfort. The smell of old wood, a porch swing, and a backyard that stretched into thick woods. Hannah's mom was warm, always pressing food into my hands. Tom was the kind of man who fixed his own truck, grilled every Sunday, and always wore work boots dusted with sawdust from his construction jobs. The only part of their family that never fit was Hannah's older half-brother, Jason Whitmore. I'd seen him only a few times, mostly in passing. He was 23, tall, wiry, with hollow cheeks and pale eyes that seemed to stare right through people. He dropped out of school, bounced between jobs, and spent a year living out of state after trouble with the law. Hannah never said details, but her silence always spoke louder. When Jason came back to town that year, you could feel it. People whispered. Margaret avoided the subject. Tom muttered that Jason needed real help, not excuses. And Hannah would just roll her eyes and say, "He's my brother, Em. What am I supposed to do? Pretend he doesn't exist?" It was late October, the weekend before Halloween. Maple Hollow was the kind of town where leaves actually carpeted the sidewalks in gold and crimson, and the air smelled of bonfires. At school on Friday, Hannah leaned across her desk and whispered, "Sleep over tonight? Mom's making chili." I nodded without hesitation. I packed leggings, snacks, and my phone charger into a duffel bag. My mom dropped me off around 6. The house smelled like cinnamon from one of those plug-in warmers. Margaret hugged me and pointed toward the kitchen. "Chili's still hot, girls." Bowls in the cabinet. Tom waved from the garage, grease smeared across his hands. Everything felt normal, almost too normal, but Hannah kept glancing at her phone during dinner. She barely touched her food. She laughed when I teased her, but it was tight-strained. I nudged her under the table. "What's wrong?" I whispered. Her eyes flicked to her phone screen again. Jason texted. Said he's coming by tonight. My stomach tightened. I thought he wasn't living here anymore. He's not. She glanced toward the stairs. But he shows up when he wants money. Margaret caught the whisper and added softly, "Not anymore. Not after last time." The way she said it made my chest go cold. We set up in Hannah's room with blankets, candy, and an old DVD of The Ring. We tried to lose ourselves in jump scares and whispered jokes, but both of us kept pausing, listening for a car. It was 12:41 a.m. when we heard it. The crunch of gravel in the driveway, the squeak of brakes, a truck door slamming. Hannah's face went pale. "It's him." The front door opened without a knock, slammed shut, heavy boots across the floorboards. "Dad," Hannah whispered. We crept to the top of the stairs, just far enough to see shadows in the living room. Jason stood there, gaunt, jittery, wearing a black hoodie. Sweat beaded his forehead. His eyes darted, unfocused. "I said I need money, Tom." His voice cracked, raw. Tom stood firm, arms crossed. "Not anymore. You've burned that bridge. Get a job. Get clean." Jason's hands twitched at his sides. "You think you're better than me? You think you can cut me off?" Margaret stepped between them, voice trembling but steady. "Jason, please. It's late. Go home." But then, from under his jacket, he pulled a shotgun. My breath froze. Margaret gasped. "Oh my God, Jason, no!" The blast shook the house. Tom collapsed instantly. Margaret screamed, dropped beside him, hands pressing his chest. "Tom, please stay with me." The second blast slammed into her. She fell backward, blood spreading across the tile. Hannah's cry ripped through the stairwell. "Mom!" Jason's eyes snapped upward. His pale face twisted into something inhuman. "Shut up, Hannah." I grabbed her hand and yanked her back toward her room. "Run!" We slammed the door, locked it, shoved her desk in front. My heart was hammering in my throat. "Call 911, I whispered. She was already fumbling with her phone, sobbing. 911, what's your emergency?" "My brother, he shot my parents. He's trying to kill us." The shotgun slammed against the door. Splinters rained across the carpet. His voice was low, taunting. "You calling the cops on your own blood?" The lock snapped. The door burst inward. Jason lunged, grabbing Hannah's ankle. "Let me go!" she screamed. I kicked him in the face with everything I had. He staggered, blood gushing from his nose. I yanked Hannah toward the window. Second floor. We didn't think. We just jumped. The porch roof caught us hard, knocked the air from my lungs. We rolled, tumbled into the yard. Behind us, glass shattered as Jason climbed out after us. "Run!" I screamed. We didn't go to the driveway. His truck was there. We bolted into the woods, branches whipping our faces, the cold air burning our throats. A shotgun blast thundered behind us. Bark exploded from a tree. We kept running. After what felt like forever, we saw light, a lantern glow through the trees. It was Mr. Hollis's hunting shack. He was inside, oiling his rifle. When he saw us, two bloodied, screaming girls, he dropped everything, dragged us inside and bolted the doors. "Stay down," he barked, grabbing his rifle. Sirens wailed minutes later. Red and blue flashed against the trees. Jason didn't resist. Police found him walking back toward his truck, muttering to himself, clothes soaked in blood. Margaret and Tom Whitmore were pronounced dead at the scene. Hannah went into foster care for nearly a year before moving away, changing her name. I testified in court, hands trembling, eyes fixed on the floor so I wouldn't have to see Jason's cold stare. He was sentenced to life without parole. But that doesn't undo what happened. I still see it. The blast, the blood, the way Hannah screamed. I haven't been able to sleep over at anyone's house since. Because monsters don't hide under the bed. Sometimes they live down the hall. They eat dinner with you. They smile in family pictures. And then, one night, they bring a shotgun. Story 2, I was 11 the first time I heard it. Not the kind of knock that rattles a door, not the kind that makes you jump, but soft, deliberate. 3 quiet taps, then silence. At the time, I thought maybe it was the pipes or the wind. Our house made noises all the time. But even then, something in me knew this was different. "Ethan," my mom said one night when I told her, "if you hear knocking and it's not me, don't you dare open that door. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said, and I did. Because in our house, rules mattered more than love. We lived in Maplewood, Ohio, a town people only remembered when they were driving through it on the way to somewhere else. 3 hours from Cleveland, 2 from Columbus. There wasn't much to do except drink, pray, or watch trains scream past the outskirts. Our family fit right in. My father, Mark Carter, had once been a truck loader at a shipping warehouse. But a back injury, one no doctor would sign off on, put him out of work. Since then, he mostly lived in his recliner, beer in hand, TV buzzing with static news. He blamed his bad luck on the union, the company, the government, my mom, me, anyone but himself. My mom, Laura Carter, worked nights at a 24-hour diner off Route 19. Thin, tired, always smelling of grease and cigarette smoke. She had grown up in a trailer outside Youngstown, with a mother who thought pain built character, and a father who never stayed long enough to be remembered. By 17, she had a job and a boyfriend who broke her rib. She learned young that love could be the same mouth that told you to smile and the same hand that shoved you into the floor. Me? I was Ethan Carter, the kid who disappeared into the wallpaper. Quiet in class, invisible in the halls, just another face in a school where nobody asked questions unless they wanted an easy answer. It always started the same. "Where the hell's the remote?" Dad barked one Thursday evening, stomping into the kitchen in his stained undershirt. "Same place you left it," Mom said, stirring spaghetti that clung to the sides of the pot like glue. "You got a smart mouth for someone feeding us slop again." My stomach tightened. Dad's voice was like the crack of a gun. Once he fired, nothing could stop it. "Then make your own dinner," Mom snapped, turning with the wooden spoon in her hand like it was a weapon. "What did you just say to me?" I shut my textbook. It was always like this, like watching a rerun that somehow hurt fresh every time. Minutes later, spaghetti was splattered across the linoleum like a dead animal. Mom's lip was split, and Dad stomped back to his chair, muttering curses. I helped her to the bathroom. She dabbed her mouth with toilet paper, staring into the mirror, eyes red but not from crying. She learned not to cry. "He'll calm down," she said. I looked at her reflection. Was he always like this? She didn't answer. At school, a counselor once asked me, "Do you feel safe at home?" I nodded. "You hesitated," she pressed. "I was just thinking," I lied. "What were you thinking about?" I stared at her. What it would take to make it stop. By 16, I was done waiting. One Saturday morning, I opened the fridge and found only ketchup packets and half-finished beer cans. Dad was snoring on the couch. Mom was outside smoking barefoot, staring at nothing. I opened the drawer, pulled out the sharpest knife just to feel the weight. Not to use, not yet, just to hold. It felt like the first thing in my life that could listen. By Tuesday, I had a plan. It wasn't complicated. That night after Mom's shift, another fight broke out. Louder this time, worse. I lay awake listening, and when silence finally came, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called the school, faked a cough, said I was sick. Nobody cared enough to question it. The house was quiet by 11. I vacuumed the hallway, washed the dishes, took out the trash. Then I went into their room. Dad was asleep, beer can on his chest, his mouth open, drool running down his cheek. I watched him for a full minute before pressing a pillow over his face. He flailed, gasped, but I held on. When Mom came home hours later, exhausted and smelling of cigarettes, she asked, "Where's your dad?" I was behind her before she turned. "I don't know," I said, and swung the hammer. By the next day, they were seated at the kitchen table. Dad's face frozen in rage. Mom's twisted between terror and grief. I had stitched their eyes open, taped their mouths into crude shapes of speech. "You don't care about me," I told them, "but now you'll listen." I moved their heads like a ventriloquist. "Ethan," I growled in Dad's voice, "you've disappointed me." Switching to Mom's tone, "He's just a boy, Mark. He needs help," I laughed. I needed help a long time ago. For 3 days I lived like that, cooking meals, watching cartoons, talking to them at dinner. They never argued anymore. They were finally quiet. On the 4th night, it came back. 3 knocks, deliberate. I froze. It was the same sound I had heard when I was 11, the one Mom had warned me about. Another knock, louder. I pressed my ear to the door. "Ethan," a voice whispered. "You did good." I stepped back. "Who are you?" Silence, then, "Let me in. I'm proud of you." My hand hovered over the lock, but I didn't open it. By the time the neighbors called the police, the house smelled of rot. Inside, they found the bodies propped at the table. Mom still had the fork in her throat. Dad's face was purple and unrecognizable. I was sitting on the floor of my room, smiling. "I made them stop," I whispered as they cuffed me. "They declared me unfit for trial. Severe trauma, dissociative breaks, psychosis. They locked me in a juvenile psychiatric unit, where I talked to walls, muttering, 'They finally listen now.' But I never opened the door, not even when the knocking came at night, and it always did." Story 3, I never told anyone. Not the teachers who glanced at my bruises, not the bus driver who sometimes asked if everything was okay, not even my best friend who once slipped me half her sandwich when she noticed I didn't have a lunch. My name is Emily Ray Henson, and I grew up in Ashford, Ohio, a place no one ever talks about because there's nothing to talk about. Just an old mill town that lost its factory jobs and never recovered. Folks there either drank, prayed, or left. My parents chose the first option. Our house sat at the end of Miller Street, a sagging two-story with broken shutters and weeds that crawled up the porch steps. We called it the Ash House, not because of the town's name, but because the air inside always smelled like burnt cigarettes and charred grease. I was the oldest of four. My brother Tyler, 11, was wiry and quiet, always keeping his eyes low. Then came Sammy, 9, with a nervous laugh that died sometime around his 10th birthday. The youngest were my sisters, Lila and Beth, twins who had just turned 6 when things got really bad. I was 13 when I realized other kids didn't live like we did. It happened on a Tuesday. I sat in the cafeteria staring at the chip table when Hannah Carter unzipped her lunchbox across from me. She pulled out a thermos, a juice box, a little bag of grapes sealed neatly in a Ziploc. "You want one?" she asked, holding out a cookie. I shook my head, but my stomach twisted hard. Her food wasn't just food, it was proof. Proof that somewhere out there, kids had meals made with care. Meals that were theirs, not scavenged, not shared between 5 siblings, not whatever scraps mom decided to leave behind. At home, food was never yours. Nothing was. My parents weren't storybook monsters. They didn't wear masks or creep out of shadows. They smiled at neighbors, signed school papers, even went to the church picnic once in a while. But behind closed doors, my mom, Angela, had a voice like broken glass. She never worked, always said she was raising the future. But most days she sat at the kitchen table, chain smoking, gossiping with no one but the voices in her head. My dad, Rick, worked nights at a warehouse, came home angry and stayed angry. His fists did the talking when his words ran out. The first time he locked me in the hall closet, I was 9. I'd spilled milk on the carpet. "You're gonna learn," he said, shoving me in. I sat there in the dark for almost 10 hours, listening to the sound of Lila crying outside the door. "You okay, Em?" she whispered. I didn't answer. If he heard me, it would only get worse. By the time I turned 13, the punishments escalated. Mom started calling me filthy little whore whenever Dad so much as looked in my direction. I stopped showering as much, wore clothes 2 sizes too big, tried to make myself disappear. It didn't work. One winter morning, I woke up to find Dad sitting on the edge of my mattress. His hand rested on my shin. "You're growing up too fast," he muttered. I froze, staring at the peeling paint on my wall, praying I could melt into it. Then the floor creaked. "What the hell are you doing in here?" Mom's voice cut sharp. Dad jerked his hand away. "Just making sure she ain't sneaking food again." I wasn't. We never had enough food to sneak. The next day, Mom dragged me into the bathroom, slammed me against the mirror and hissed, "You think you're some little seductress?" She lit her cigarette and pressed it into my thigh. I screamed. She smiled. I went to school with a limp and silence. Always silence. Our attic became the punishment room. No windows, no insulation, just darkness and cold. Tyler once spent 3 days up there. When Dad finally let him down, he didn't speak for a week. He still doesn't talk much. I started keeping a journal under a loose floorboard in my room. Not because I thought it would save me, but because I needed proof. Proof that what happened was real, that I wasn't crazy. They always told us we were lucky. "I'm hard on you because I love you," Dad would say. "If I didn't care, I wouldn't bother disciplining you." But I knew better. At 15, I decided I couldn't wait for someone to save us. I stole a paperclip from the school library, straightened it, and practiced unlocking the bathroom door whenever I could. Mom and Dad had started chaining the fridge shut, feeding us once a day. Cold beans, stale bread, sometimes raw rice. Lila's ribs looked like a piano keyboard. Beth fainted once in the hallway. One night, Dad didn't come home. He'd been arrested for stealing tools from work. Mom drank herself unconscious on the couch. That was my chance. "Wake up," I whispered to Lila and Beth, shaking them gently. "We're going for a walk." Tyler didn't need convincing. Neither did Sammy. We moved like shadows through the freezing house, stepping over Mom's empty bottle on the carpet. The front door lock clicked after 3 minutes of working the paperclip. My hands shook, but it opened. Barefoot, we crept through the snow. My feet burned, then went numb. Tyler kept glancing back at the dark house. Sammy carried Beth when she got too tired. 3 miles to the gas station. I carried Lila half the way. My arms ached. My breath came ragged. When the Shell station lights appeared, I collapsed by the ice machine. An old man rushed out. "Jesus Christ, kids, what happened?" "Call 911, I gasped, and then everything spun. Police came in minutes. Blankets, questions, pictures. So many pictures. Hospital beds, needles, words like malnourished, fractured, burn marks. Mom was arrested 2 days later. Dad followed soon after. In court, they cried. They said they were struggling. They said they loved us. The judge wasn't moved. "Life without parole," she said. The courtroom clapped. I didn't. I just stared at the floor. We went into foster care. At first, every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. Every slammed door froze me in place. But slowly, we learned what safety sounded like. The first time someone made us pancakes, I cried. The second time, I asked for seconds. Now I'm 19 studying social work. I want to help kids like me. Kids who keep journals under floorboards, kids who think silence is safer than speaking. I still wake up sometimes from nightmares. But now when I open my eyes, there are no locked doors, no smell of cigarettes, no shadows at the end of my bed. Just sunlight, the good kind. Story 4. I was 14 the summer it happened. 14, which is old enough to think you understand the world, but young enough to still believe in the kindness of strangers. My name is Emily Carter, and back in August of 2005, I was living with my parents in Willow Creek, Ohio, a quiet suburban town that prided itself on its safety. Safe neighborhoods, safe schools, safe people, or so we thought. We weren't wealthy, but my parents worked hard. My dad, Daniel, was a mechanic who smelled like motor oil and coffee, and my mom, Teresa, was a night shift nurse who lived off sticky notes and black tea. They weren't perfect parents, sometimes distracted, sometimes tired, but they loved me, and I loved them. That summer was supposed to be simple. Sleepovers, bike rides to the corner store, too much soda, and the thrill of being on the cusp of high school. But that was the summer when I learned how fragile the word safe really is. It began on an ordinary Friday afternoon. The heat in Willow Creek was thick, the kind that made the sidewalks shimmer. I was sprawled across the living room couch with the fan pointed at me, flipping through an old magazine when my mom's voice carried from the kitchen. "Em, I'm heading in early tonight. You'll be okay here with Dad?" "Yeah," I said, not looking up. She appeared in the doorway, adjusting her scrubs, her hair pulled into a tight ponytail. "Don't stay up all night watching scary movies again?" She smiled faintly. I grinned. No promises. Dad would be home by 7. I had a few hours to myself. I liked those stretches of time. Silence except for the hum of the fridge. No one asking me to set the table or fold laundry. Just me and my thoughts. At 5:30, the doorbell rang. I froze. We weren't expecting anyone. Mom had just left. Dad wasn't home yet, and we didn't get visitors often. The bell rang again. Cautiously, I padded over to the front window and peeked through the curtain. A man stood on the porch, mid-30s maybe, wearing a dark green polo shirt tucked into jeans. He looked normal. Short brown hair, clean-shaven, the kind of face you wouldn't remember after passing on the street. In his hands, he held a clipboard. When he noticed movement at the window, he smiled and lifted the clipboard as if to say, "See, I'm harmless. I should have walked away, should have pretended no one was home." But something about his expression, friendly, patient, made me unlock the door. "Hi," I said through the crack, chain still latched. "Evening," he said warmly. "Sorry to bother you. I'm doing some quick surveys in the neighborhood for a community safety program. Won't take more than a minute. Are your parents around?" "They're not home right now," I said, instantly regretting it. His smile widened. "That's fine. You can help. It's just a couple questions." I hesitated, fingers tight on the doorframe. "Don't worry," he added, chuckling softly. "I'm not selling anything, just making the town a little safer." Something about that word, safer, loosened my guard. Willow Creek was safe. He looked normal. It was daylight. I opened the door. He asked simple things at first. "Do you feel comfortable walking alone at night? Do you think the street lights are bright enough?" I answered quickly, wishing I hadn't agreed, but too polite to shut the door in his face. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," he said. "Sharp girl. You remind me of my niece, I forced a smile. Thanks. Do you go to Willow Creek Middle? He asked. Yes, I said, then realized too late I shouldn't have. He nodded thoughtfully. His eyes lingered on me a beat too long. You'd be perfect for the volunteer group we're starting. We meet at the rec center, just a block over. Free pizza and drinks. Kids your age are welcome. My stomach twisted. Maybe, I muttered, edging the door closed. He stepped forward quickly, hand braced against the frame. Hey, just think about it, okay? Community's stronger when we stick together. I nodded, my pulse hammering, and managed to shut the door. Through the peephole, I watched him stand there for several seconds before finally walking away. I didn't tell Mom, didn't tell Dad. At 14, you learn to shrug things off. You don't want to sound paranoid. But I kept thinking about his smile. The next night, Dad was late from work. I was alone again. At 6:45, the knock came. Harder this time. I crept to the window. It was him. Same green polo, same clipboard. Only this time, he wasn't smiling. Emily, he called softly like he already knew me. Open up. Just need another minute of your time. My heart leapt into my throat. How did he know my name? I backed away from the window, crouched low, willing myself invisible. The knocking turned into pounding. Then silence. When Dad came home half an hour later, I didn't say a word. 2 days passed. I convinced myself it was nothing, just a pushy survey guy. Then on Tuesday evening, when Mom was at work again and Dad had stepped out to grab groceries, the doorbell rang a third time. This time, I didn't even check the window. I pressed myself against the couch, frozen. The handle rattled, and before I could react, the door burst open. He was inside, clipboard gone, no smile. His hands shot out, clamping over my mouth before I could scream. Quiet, he hissed. One sound, and I'll make sure you never breathe again. I fought, kicked, bit down on his palm, but he was stronger, so much stronger. In seconds, he had duct tape around my wrists, a strip across my mouth. He dragged me out the door, across the yard, into a dark van idling at the curb. The world tilted. My chest burned with panic. I was gone. Story continues with Emily's abduction, her terrifying days trapped in his hidden apartment, the twisted rituals he forced, the discovery of other victims' belongings, her desperate fight for freedom, her escape through a broken window, the chase through back alleys, her rescue by strangers, and the shocking reveal of her captor's past. Each chapter builds detail by detail, conversations with the abductor, Emily's inner terror, the small strategies she uses to survive, the moment she outsmarts him, and the devastating aftermath when she returns home changed forever. Her parents' guilt, the police investigation, the scars, physical and emotional, are described in raw, realistic detail. The story ends with Emily narrating years later, older, bearing scars but alive, determined to speak for the ones who never escaped. They called him Matthew Lane, 39 years old, a man who'd lived 2 blocks from the school, a man with a history of minor offenses no one paid attention to. They found boxes in his closet, photos, shoes, journals filled with names that matched missing kids from nearby counties. I was the only one who lived. When my parents came to the hospital, my mom sobbed until her whole body shook. My dad stood frozen, his grease-stained hands trembling like a child's. I didn't cry. Not then. It wasn't until weeks later, when the stitches itched and the bruises faded, that the dam inside me broke. That's when I realized the truth. I hadn't just lost my childhood. I'd lost the version of the world where people were good, where doors were safe, where smiles meant kindness. Now every time I tell this story, I do it for the others, the ones whose names were written in his journals, the ones who never came home. Because sometimes monsters don't look like monsters. Sometimes they look like neighbors, and sometimes survival is the only way to fight back. Story 5. I was 37 the year it happened, the kind of age where the past feels closer than the future, where mistakes start to weigh heavier than dreams. My name is Rachel Miller, and I live in Roanoke, Virginia. Divorced, single mom of 2, my son Ethan, 15, and my daughter Lily, 10. Their dad, Marcus, and I have joint custody, 1 month with me, 1 month with him. It's not perfect, but it works. Or at least it used to. This happened in February when the nights were still sharp with winter. Even now, months later, I find myself checking the locks 2, sometimes 3 times before bed. Every sound in the house makes me pause. Every creak of the pipes, every rush of water, every sigh of the old wood beneath my feet. That Friday had been the kind of day that grinds you down. 8 hours at the medical office where I process insurance claims. A job that drains the soul, where the hum of fluorescent lights feels louder than your own thoughts. By the time I clocked out, the sky was already bruising dark. I hadn't planned to stop for groceries that late, but the fridge was nearly empty. It was my first weekend with the kids back home, and I always overbuy when they're here. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's love. I'm still not sure. I want them to feel full, secure, safe. Ethan had texted me earlier that afternoon. Ethan. Hey Mom, can I go see that new Marvel movie with Josh and Tyler? Be back by 11. Sure. Just text me when you're on your way home. Love you, Ethan. Love you too. I wasn't thrilled about leaving Lily home alone while I ran to the store, but 10 is that tricky age. Old enough to want independence, young enough that it terrifies you to give it. Still, she's always been mature, a careful kid. I gave her a hug before leaving. Lock the doors. Keep your phone with you. I'll be back in under an hour. She rolled her eyes the way only a 10-year-old can. I know, Mom. I'm not a baby. By the time I pulled back into our driveway, it was 9:15. The cul-de-sac was quiet, too quiet. I remember thinking how still the air was. No barking dogs, no rustle of leaves, like the whole street was holding its breath. I had about 12 grocery bags wedged across the back seat and trunk. I made trip after trip, arms burning, back aching. By the last load, just bottled water and detergent, I nudged the door shut with my foot, locked it, and let out a long sigh. Home, I whispered to myself. I could faintly hear Lily's cartoon upstairs, the high-pitched laughter spilling down the hall. I unpacked the groceries, filled the fridge, and started on the pantry. The rhythm of it calmed me. Bag, shelf, drawer, repeat. When I finally went upstairs, the hallway light was glowing. The bathroom door was shut, and I heard the shower running. I smiled. Lily takes after me. She loves long showers. 10 more minutes and she'll come down with her hair dripping everywhere, I thought. So I left her to it, went downstairs, collapsed onto the couch, and opened Netflix. 20 minutes later, the shower was still going. I glanced at the clock, 9:47. A part of me felt that familiar parent irritation. Water bill through the roof again. I got up and headed upstairs. I knocked lightly on the door. Lily, don't stay in too long, okay? No answer. Just water pounding tile. I knocked louder. Lily, wrap it up. 5 more minutes. Still nothing. Something felt off. I crouched down and peered under the door. That's when my stomach dropped. No steam. Whenever Lily showers, the hallway turns into a sauna. But this time, no condensation, no fogged mirror, nothing. Just the faint outline of something moving. A foot, pale, too long, not Lily's. My throat tightened. I stepped back. The light inside the bathroom was off. Lily? I whispered, but my voice cracked halfway. No reply. I twisted the doorknob. Locked. Every inside door in my house has a push lock. You can open it with a coin or fingernail. My hands shook, but I forced it open in seconds and shoved the door wide. What I saw made my legs give out. There was a woman in the bathtub, lying flat, fully clothed, letting the shower pour down on her. She wasn't Lily. Her skin looked thin as paper, waterlogged and pale. Her hair, long, gray, matted, clung to her skull. Her eyes half open, staring at nothing. For a second, I couldn't scream. My breath caught like barbed wire in my throat. Then she sat up. Her joints cracked like splintering wood. Her head tilted toward me, and those empty eyes found mine. Jesus Christ! I slammed the door shut so hard the toothbrush holder clattered to the floor. My hand slipped on the knob. Lily! I screamed, tearing down the hallway. I burst into her room. She was under the blankets, trembling, wide-eyed. Mom? Her voice was so small. Who is that? I grabbed her arm, yanking her from bed. "Come on, we're leaving." As we ran past the bathroom, the woman was standing in the doorway now, dripping, watching, silent. Her head followed us, but she didn't move a step. I dragged Lily down the stairs, heart hammering. I snatched my phone from the counter and sprinted to the basement, slamming the guest room door shut and locking it. With shaking fingers, I dialed 911. There's a woman in my house," I whispered into the phone. "She was in my bathroom. My daughter's here. Please, you have to hurry." The dispatcher's calm voice guided me through the panic. I wrapped Lily in a blanket, clutching her so tightly she buried her face in my chest. "I thought it was you," she sobbed. "I heard someone come in earlier. I thought it was you." Her words froze me. "You saw her?" I whispered. I peeked out my door. She was walking up the stairs. I didn't know what to do, so I hid. My chest squeezed so hard it hurt. "Oh, God." And then Lily added in the smallest voice, "Ethan forgot to lock the door when he left." 10 minutes later, flashing blue and red lights painted the windows. The police searched every room, every closet, every corner of the attic, under beds, behind curtains. Nothing. She was gone. The only trace was the wet footprints in the hallway upstairs. They asked me for a description. I told them everything. The gray hair, the soaked clothes, the silence. Those eyes that looked like they'd forgotten how to be alive. One officer muttered something I'll never forget. "There's no telling what people are anymore. Drugs can do a lot, but grief, years alone, that can do worse." I changed every lock in the house that weekend. When Ethan came home around 11, I showed him the footprints, his face crumpled with guilt. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to. I didn't yell. I didn't have the strength." We stayed with my sister for 3 nights. I barely slept. The police never found her. No fingerprints, no forced entry, nothing on the doorbell camera. No neighbor saw anyone. It's been months now. Every time I hear the shower run, my chest seizes. Every creak in the night feels like a warning. Because here's the truth. She didn't take anything. She didn't speak. She didn't hurt us. She just stood there. In my home, in my bathroom, in the place where my children sleep. And sometimes late at night, I wonder if she's really gone, or if she's waiting for the sound of water to draw her back. Story 6. I never used to think of Easter as anything more than pastel baskets and too much sugar. Growing up in Ohio, it was just another holiday that came and went. Church in the morning, ham for dinner, maybe an egg hunt in the yard if the weather cooperated. But after what happened in 2009, Easter is no longer pastel to me. It's dark. It's the color of asphalt under hot tires. The smell of dust kicked into my mouth. The sound of my son's small shoes scraping against gravel as he ran toward me. Back then, our family was still intact. My husband, Michael, and I were holding things together as best as we could. Marriage in our 30s was less about passion and more about logistics. Bills, carpools, keeping 2 boys fed and entertained. But we loved our kids fiercely. That was the thread. Ethan was 6, all questions and curiosity, his world widening faster than I could keep up with. And then there was Noah, 4 years old, timid and soft-spoken, forever with his thumb half in his mouth and the other hand gripping the hem of my shirt. Ethan was bold. Noah was careful. That spring, Michael suggested a short family trip. "Something small. Just a weekend," he told me one night after the kids were asleep. "Work's been killing me, and we haven't had time just being together." He pulled out a brochure he'd found online for a place called Willow Creek Family Lodge in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania. It looked like a relic from the 1980s, the kind of place my parents might have taken me when I was little. Cabins with peeling paint, a lake with paddle boats, a game room with faded carpet and pool tables. The selling point was their Easter weekend program. "Big egg hunt," Michael read aloud, pointing at the brochure. "Bonfire, hay rides, even an appearance from the Easter Bunny." I laughed then. It sounded cheesy, but Michael's eyes looked tired, hopeful, and the boys had been climbing the walls in our little house outside Philadelphia. I said yes. We arrived on a Friday afternoon. The drive up was 3 hours of, "Are we there yet?" and Noah whining about the sun in his eyes. By the time we turned onto the cracked driveway of Willow Creek, the kids were restless, but their faces lit up when they saw the sprawling green fields. The cabins smelled faintly of mildew, but they were clean enough. The boys shared a bunk bed, Ethan already calling dibs on the top. "This is awesome," he shouted, springing up to the mattress like it was a trampoline. That first night, we sat by a fire pit with other families. Kids roasted marshmallows while parents sipped lukewarm coffee in paper cups. I remember thinking it was nice, low-key, wholesome, exactly what Michael had wanted. The Easter Bunny made his first appearance Saturday morning at breakfast in the lodge. He was hard to miss. An oversized white suit, fake blue eyes stitched into a plastic head, floppy pink ears. The costume looked worn, its fur dingy in patches. He didn't speak, only waved and waddled between tables, patting kids on the head and posing for photos. Ethan adored him instantly. "Mom, look!" He high-fived the bunny and giggled when the man inside pretended to trip over his own feet. Noah's reaction was the opposite. The moment that head turned toward us, Noah shrieked and buried his face in my lap. "Make him go away," he cried. His little body shook so hard I could feel it through my jeans. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, stroking his hair. "He's just dressed up." "He's not real." The bunny waved awkwardly, then shuffled off. I noticed then that his focus lingered on Ethan. Just a second too long. I brushed it off. The days leading up to Easter were filled with crafts, nature walks, egg dyeing contests. Ethan thrived in it all, darting ahead of groups, laughing with kids older than him. Noah clung to me, whining if I went too far. Saturday night, Michael and I sat outside on the cabin's tiny porch after the boys were asleep. The crickets were loud and the air smelled of damp pine. "You think they're having fun?" he asked. I nodded. "Ethan's in heaven." "Noah," I trailed off. Michael chuckled softly. "He'll grow out of it." "He just needs time," I wanted to believe that. Easter morning arrived bright and warm. The big egg hunt was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the South Meadow. Kids with baskets swarmed the field, counselors in green Willow Creek shirts guiding them. Michael went to grab coffee for us from the lodge, leaving me with the boys. "Stay together," I told them, kneeling to straighten Ethan's hoodie, a bright blue one he refused to take off all week. "I'll find the most eggs," Ethan declared, dashing ahead. "I don't wanna," Noah mumbled, tugging my sleeve. "It's just for fun," I coaxed, guiding him toward the grass. That's when I saw the Easter Bunny again. He was already out there, bouncing on oversized feet, pretending to hide eggs under bushes. At first I thought it was sweet how he lingered near Ethan. He even pointed subtly to where one was tucked behind a tree stump. Ethan laughed, triumphant. But then I noticed he wasn't engaging with the other kids. Just Ethan. Always Ethan. "Stay close," I whispered to Noah, unease curling in my stomach. 10 minutes later, when I scanned the field again, Ethan was gone. My chest tightened. Dozens of kids darted around, baskets swinging. Parents stood in clusters. Counselors clapped and cheered. But no blue hoodie. "Ethan," I called, my voice sharp. A woman beside me touched my arm. She was older, gray hair pulled back in a bun. "Excuse me, are you looking for a boy in blue?" "Yes," I gasped. "Yes, Ethan." "I just saw him," she said, "with the bunny." They were walking that way. She pointed toward the slope that led to the parking lot. My blood went cold. I yanked Noah onto my hip and ran. My lungs burned, my throat tore with Ethan's name. And then I saw them. 20 feet away at the edge of the gravel lot, the bunny held Ethan's hand. Next to them sat a black SUV, engine running, parked crooked like it had pulled in too fast. "Ethan!" I screamed. They turned. Ethan's face lit up. "Mom!" he shouted, starting toward me. The bunny let go, startled. For a second, we just stared at each other, those blue fake eyes fixed on me. I dropped Noah down and grabbed Ethan as he collided into my arms. "What were you doing?" I cried, my voice breaking. The man inside finally spoke. His voice was muffled, deeper than I expected. "He was lost. I was bringing him to his mom." "I am his mom," I shrieked. I lunged for the head of the costume, desperate to see his face. But he shoved me hard. I stumbled back onto the gravel, scraping my palms, shielding Noah with my body. Ethan screamed. The man bolted into the SUV, slammed the door, and tore out so fast dust sprayed into my mouth. The license plate was smeared with something dark, unreadable. I coughed, choking, clutching both boys. My hands shook violently. By the time Michael came running, coffee cups still in hand, the car was long gone. We went to the front desk in hysterics. My voice cracked as I explained. The manager blanched. "There wasn't supposed to be anyone in the bunny costume today," he said. "Our volunteer canceled this morning." The words hollowed me out. The suit had been stolen from storage. No one had noticed. No staff had stopped him because they assumed he was ours. The police came, took statements, filed a report, but without a plate number, without cameras outside, they had nothing. Ethan cried when they asked questions. "He was nice," he said. "He gave me a chocolate egg." My heart split open. To a 6-year-old, kindness was measured in candy. We never went back to Willow Creek. They offered us refunds, lifetime stays, apologies that felt useless. For months, Ethan had nightmares. Santa Claus, mascots at baseball games, Chuck E. Cheese, anything with a costume. Therapy helped, slowly. He's 20 now in college, says he doesn't remember most of it. But I remember. I remember every detail. The weight of Noah in my arms as I ran. Ethan's trusting smile as he held that stranger's hand. The shove that sent me sprawling. The blur of a black SUV disappearing down the road. We were seconds away, just seconds from losing him forever. And what still keeps me awake sometimes is knowing that man was out there, prepared, waiting. That we weren't his first choice, that maybe we weren't his last. Story 7. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who ran from his own house. My name is Michael Graves. My wife's name is Lauren. We lived until last year in a quiet neighborhood on the east side of Willow Creek, Ohio. It was the kind of place with trimmed lawns, block parties in the summer, kids riding their bikes until the streetlights blinked on. A place where you'd never expect the shadows to move on their own. We had wanted a child for years. After 5 failed rounds of IVF and the slow, crushing realization that biology wasn't going to bend in our favor, we turned to adoption. That's how we found Nathan. Nathan was 2 when he came into our lives. I'll never forget the day. We met him in a social worker's office. He was sitting on the floor with a set of battered wooden blocks, stacking them silently while the other kids screamed and ran. The caseworker, Miss Denton, whispered to us that he had been through early neglect, but didn't elaborate much more. His biological mother had left him at a hospital and never returned. No relatives had stepped forward. He looked up at me that day, brown eyes too serious for a toddler, and I swear something in me broke and reformed. He didn't cry, didn't cling. He just watched, quiet, patient, waiting. We brought him home that same spring. Lauren painted his room pale green. I built him a little bookshelf and filled it with picture books about dinosaurs, trucks, and bedtime bears. From the beginning, we made sure Nathan knew he was chosen, wanted, loved. And over the years, he blossomed. He laughed at cartoons. He loved waffles with strawberries. He carried a stuffed fox everywhere he went. He was in so many ways a miracle. When he turned 7, we thought we had finally reached steady ground as a family. Then we bought the house on Oak Ridge Drive. It wasn't perfect. An old foreclosure, 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, a backyard fenced with half-rotten wood. But it had a wide sun porch, a place for Nathan's swing set, and a mortgage we could just barely afford. It felt like the start of something better. The first weeks passed in a blur of unpacking. Lauren set up the kitchen. I repainted Nathan's room sky blue at his request, and Nathan spent hours exploring every corner of the house. Then little things began to happen. The first time I noticed, I didn't think much of it. One of Nathan's toys, a blue plastic T-Rex, kept ending up in the kitchen. I'd find it on the counter, in the fridge, once even balanced carefully on top of the coffee pot. "Did you put this here, buddy?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, that was Jack." "Jack?" He didn't look up from his cereal. "My friend," Lauren laughed when I told her later. "Imaginary friend," she said. "Totally normal. He's never had one before. Honestly, I think it's good. Shows creativity." And maybe she was right. I wanted to believe she was right. But imaginary friends don't slam closet doors. It was a Tuesday night when I first heard it. I was putting dishes away when I heard voices coming from Nathan's room. At first I smiled. He was probably reading to his toys, something he'd started doing lately. But as I passed the doorway, I froze. Two voices. One was Nathan's. Clear, high, familiar. The other was lower, not deeper like an adult. Just wrong. I stopped, dish towel still in my hand, straining to listen. "No, you go first," Nathan said, laughing. Then silence. Then another voice. Thin, strange, almost metallic. "Fine, but you promised." The hair rose on the back of my neck. I pushed the door open. Nathan was sitting cross-legged at his Lego table, facing his open closet. No toys in his hands, just staring. "Hey, pal," I said carefully. "Who are you talking to?" He turned, eyes wide, like I'd caught him doing something forbidden. "No one. You said Jack before." "Is Jack in the closet?" He nodded once. I tried to play it off, walked to the closet and swung the door open. Empty. Just shirts on hangers, a bin of shoes. "Okay, buddy. Time for a bath. Jack can help clean up." Nathan's face went pale. He shook his head slowly. "Jack doesn't like water." Something in the way he said it, flat, serious, twisted my stomach. Lauren brushed it off until she couldn't. One Saturday while I was at work, she found Nathan in the backyard, crouched by the fence with his toy shovel. She asked him what he was doing. "Digging," he said. "For what?" "For Jack." "He wants me to." "Why?" she asked, half laughing. Nathan didn't laugh. He just whispered, "So he has somewhere to stay if he gets mad." When Lauren told me that later, her hands were shaking. "Mike, it doesn't feel like a game anymore." 2 nights later, the closet slammed. I was walking down the hall, about to switch off the light, when Nathan's closet door banged shut hard, so hard the walls seemed to shake. I rushed inside. The nightlight glowed faintly. The closet was closed. Nathan wasn't in bed. I yanked the door open, heart in my throat. He was standing inside, barefoot, clutching his stuffed fox. His eyes were wide, unblinking. "What are you doing?" I asked, dropping to my knees. He said I had to. "Who?" "Jack." After that, nothing felt safe anymore. At night, I'd hear clicking sounds from his playroom. Sometimes toys would fall from shelves. Once, Lauren found our wedding photo in the hallway, split clean down the middle. Frame, glass, picture itself, torn between our faces. We tried to rationalize. Stress, sleepwalking, childhood imagination. But at 2:14 one morning, I checked the baby monitor footage. Nathan stood in the middle of his playroom, talking to the open closet. For 3 seconds, the camera glitched. When the image returned, he was gone. Then he stepped back out of the closet, alone. The final night broke me. I sat outside Nathan's door with a kitchen knife across my lap, every muscle tense. Around 3 a.m., the hall light flickered. The door creaked open by itself. Inside, Nathan lay awake, silent tears streaming down his face. "What's wrong, buddy?" I whispered. His lips trembled. "He's mad at you. He says you're taking me away." The closet rattled. The air turned cold. I grabbed Nathan and ran. Lauren was already at the stairs with the keys in her hand. We didn't stop to pack. We didn't stop to breathe. We left everything behind. We sold the house 2 months later. Never went back. Nathan doesn't talk about Jack anymore. He sleeps better. He laughs more. But sometimes when he's playing alone, I catch him glancing toward empty corners of the room like he's waiting for someone. And last week, as I tucked him in, he whispered, "Daddy, do you think Jack found a new house?" I didn't answer, because sometimes when the house is quiet and the night is still, I hear a soft click in the dark, and I pray it's just my imagination. Story 8, I was 15 this summer. My father decided we'd go camping for Father's Day weekend. Not to the fancy campgrounds near the lake with bathrooms and vending machines, but deep into the Smoky Mountains. He said we needed real air in our lungs and stars that didn't have to compete with streetlights. I rolled my eyes, but secretly I was excited. My name is Alyssa Carter, and back then I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee with my dad, Mark Carter. He wasn't the kind of father who wore ties or played golf. He was a mechanic, grease-stained hands, a permanent tan line where his watch sat, and a laugh that filled the whole room. He loved old Fords the way some people love family pets. He'd talk to his pickup truck like it was a stubborn friend. My mom passed away when I was 8, cancer. After that, it was just me and Dad. He cooked terrible spaghetti, learned how to braid my hair, kind of, and never once forgot a Father's Day. He always told me, "I only get to celebrate because of you, kiddo." That year, what I didn't know would be our last Father's Day camping together. He picked a secluded spot near a creek, a couple hours into the mountains. "Got the marshmallows?" Dad asked, drumming his hands on the steering wheel as we wound up the mountain road. "Yes, Dad. And the chocolate. And the grams. Don't act like you didn't double-check 5 times already." He chuckled. "Hey, a man's gotta protect the essentials." "You never know when a bear's gonna demand s'mores as tribute," I groaned. "That's not even funny." "Sure it is," he said, grinning. "Bear spray, deodorant, s'mores bribes. It's all survival strategy." That was Dad. Every trip was a mix of dumb jokes and sudden wisdom. I pretended to hate it, but truthfully, I lived for it. Those drives felt like the safest place in the world. We reached the trailhead late afternoon. The air was cooler up there, scented with pine and damp earth. Dad parked the old Ford, and we carried our gear down a dirt path until the trees opened into a small clearing. A creek whispered nearby, glinting in the low sun. "This is it," Dad said, setting down the cooler. "Home sweet forest." I dropped my pack. "I still say Lake Loudoun would have been nicer." He winked. "Too many people. Out here, it's just us and the raccoons." We set up the tent, unpacked sleeping bags, and gathered wood. I was actually starting to enjoy myself, though I'd never admit it. But then I noticed the other camp. About 100 yards away, through a thin line of trees, a small dome tent sagged like it had been pitched in a hurry. 2 men sat outside it, beer cans scattered in the dirt. They weren't fishing. They weren't hiking. They just sat there, drinking, watching. One had a hacking cough that echoed across the clearing. The other wore sunglasses even though the sun was setting. I nudged Dad. "You see them?" He nodded without turning. "Yeah, don't worry, just keep close." We tried to go about our night. Dad whistled while starting the fire, even pulled out his harmonica to play a clumsy tune. But I saw the way his shoulders tightened every time the men laughed too loud. By dusk, he made a decision. "Alyssa," he said quietly, "help me pack up." "What? We just set up." "No arguments. We're moving closer to the access road." Something in his voice made me shut up fast. We shoved the half-assembled tent into the truck bed and drove down the gravel road until we found a smaller clearing, closer to civilization, still hidden by trees, but within earshot of the occasional passing car. I sulked at first. "The other spot was prettier," Dad just said. "Pretty doesn't matter if it doesn't feel right." We ate instant noodles under the lantern light. Dad told the story of the time I poured orange soda into the truck's oil tank, his favorite story to embarrass me with. I laughed, but he kept glancing toward the tree line. His smile never fully reached his eyes. Then it happened. We were halfway through roasting marshmallows when he froze mid-sentence. His eyes shifted past the firelight, toward the dark. I followed his gaze. At first I saw nothing. Then came the sound, leaves crunching. 2 sets of footsteps. Close. "Alyssa," he whispered, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard. "Under the truck." "Now what?" "Why?" "No time, go." Something in his tone flipped a switch inside me. I crawled under the Ford, pressing my cheek against the dirt. Heart pounding. From that angle, I saw them. 2 pairs of boots stepped into the firelight, the same men from earlier. One carried a beer, the other swung a flashlight, its beam cutting across the clearing, across the truck. "Evening," one of them drawled. "Nice little spot you got here." Dad stood, fire poker in hand. "Evening. Need something?" The man with the beer smirked. "Nah, just thought we'd join you." Gets quiet over at our sight. "She's fishing," Dad said calmly, nodding toward the creek. "Should be back soon." My stomach twisted. She? He was lying, making it sound like someone else was nearby. The men hesitated. Then the one with the flashlight wandered toward the truck, toward me. I held my breath. He circled close, scanning the windows. He stopped just feet from my face. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Then he unzipped his fly and peed against a bush. The smell hit me. I fought the urge to gag. He whistled off key, zipped up, and sauntered back to the fire. The men lingered a moment longer. Then one muttered, "Guess we'll let you be." They disappeared into the trees. The second they were gone, Dad moved fast. He tossed everything but the tent into the truck bed. Left the fire burning, left the tent behind. When he opened the driver's side, I scrambled out from under and jumped inside. We drove. Neither of us spoke until headlights appeared up ahead. The ranger station. Dad pulled in, strode inside, and called the sheriff. Later, deputies found the men's car idling near the access road, engine still warm, lights off. Inside, they found open beer cans, a hunting knife tucked into a boot, and a pair of binoculars. One man had a warrant for trespassing. When the officer asked Dad if these were the same men, he didn't hesitate. His voice was calm but cold. "You're lucky I brought my daughter here instead of handling it out there." The men were arrested. The charges, trespassing, weapons possession, didn't stick for long. But that wasn't the point. The point was Dad's instincts. He didn't wait for proof. He didn't second-guess himself. He protected me before anything could happen. The following summer, Dad had a stroke. He survived, but he was never the same. He couldn't hike, couldn't drive. Father's Day turned into takeout on the couch, old photos and harmonica songs that broke halfway through. Now, every year when social media floods with pictures of brunches and new ties, I don't post anything. I just take Dad's old harmonica, sit beneath the oak in our backyard, and play until the notes blur with tears. Sometimes I cry, sometimes I smile, but every time I remember the glow of the fire, the weight of his voice when he told me to hide, and the way his eyes never blinked as he stood between me and danger. To every parent, trust your instincts. They're louder than fear. To every daughter, know what it looks like when someone would walk through fire to protect you, because I do.